Hey, everybody. Here we are with another episode of the Sidebar podcast. I've got my friends Cynthia and Danny here. And today, are you excited?
I am. I don't know about
We're
you guys.
getting ready to tackle the Bible and the Bachelor, or it, Bachelorette.
Yep.
After last time, the Bible and Bruno Mars, we stuck to the B theme for another time, the Bible and the Bachelor.
Yeah, we did.
Here we go. Danny's really excited. Cynthia and I are somewhat skeptical. Danny is our crack researcher.
Yes.
What did you learn about The Bachelor that everybody is dying to know?
All right. Well, to be honest, I'm not like a super fan. I only
Now she's qualified.
Now you're not a super fan.
I started watching in college, and I'm not like a avid watcher. But so The Bachelor first aired in 2002. It has 20 years running right now.
That's ridiculous.
26 seasons, 11 spin-offs, such as The Bachelorette, Bachelor in Paradise, even Bachelor Winter Games.
You're making this stuff up.
Nope.
This is
Happened
legit.
during the Winter Olympics.
What?
Yeah. But then also a little background as to how the show works.
Okay.
If listeners haven't watched it before, about 30 to 35 women compete for the chance to marry one man.
Okay.
through-
Keyword there, marry. I'll
yes.
get back to that one.
Right.
They go on one-on-one dates. They go on group dates. There's even the confrontational two-on-one date. Usually that's when a fight is happening.
How
with
could
the
anything go wrong with that?
contestant.
A group date.
Yeah. And each week...
You did one of those, Cynthia. You didn't know it.
I know.
That's a good point. We'll come to that too.
Listen.
But each week, the women who get to stay receive a rose, and those who don't are asked to leave. Once he reaches 4 women, they have hometowns. Down to 3 women, they have fantasy suites where they spend a night together with no cameras, which up until then, they weren't allowed to do that, and they spend the night together. Now, marriage isn't always guaranteed. They say that's the goal, but at the end of it, you can say, I'd love to just continue this relationship. But then you don't get the crazy expensive ring for free, which is another caveat. You get a ring for free if you stay together for at least 9 months.
Oh,
What?
you have to earn it.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
Incentive to stay together. A
Yeah.
ring.
yep, free ring. But
Okay.
the funny thing that I found when I was researching this is that when
Like only one?
well, yeah, that's true, is The Bachelor, the concept comes off as Christian-y in the sense that it's about marriage. It's about opposite gender. Most of the contestants are from the Bible Belt. Most contestants actually go on and say, I'm a
Interesting.
Christian. Like there's a bachelor that said, I'm not going to be intimate with any of my contestants because of my faith. So there's this weird thing going on where it comes off Christian, but at the same time, I think you guys have opinion, like how you guys feel, like it's not really a Christian look at dating. I mean,
Okay, that's one way to put
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So, Cynthia, tell us in your research for this podcast, let us all know, what did you do exactly?
Listen. I used to take pride in saying, I've never seen that show. So when I knew that we had to do this podcast on
Right.
this subject, I said, okay, now I have to watch it, and I can never say I've never seen The
Oh,
Bachelor.
you lost that excuse.
Yeah.
I'm really hurt by that.
work really just messed up your streak.
Yeah, you did. But I just wanted to be able to bring solid information and opinions. So I watched 5 episodes of The Bachelor and 5 episodes of The Bachelorette. And I can never.
You're so committed.
I can never get that time back.
It's
Like,
gone.
It's
Yeah.
gone. And I'm just like, what?
That's amazing. And my research is basically having fully formed opinion with very little information.
No context.
What I've seen from the commercials is about enough. I don't think I've ever seen a full episode, but I've seen enough to know, you know, everything that's in there and tuned in or out or whatever. I don't even remember. My point basically is at the end of the day, I think I blame The Bachelor for most of the problems in the world. I blame The Bachelor for COVID, the current Ukraine-Russia crisis. I blame The Bachelor. I think basically it's its fault for the downfall of our entire society. Other than that, I don't have any problems with it whatsoever.
Just that.
Just minor concerns.
Oh,
Just
Lord.
minor concerns. But I actually think there are a lot of lessons to learn from The Bachelor. It just so happens for me, almost all of them are on the what not to do side of things.
Oh, for sure.
So I think there are plenty of those kinds of lessons if you want to say, hey, this is not what I would recommend that you would do. I'm not bashing The Bachelor. Like, at the end of the day, if you want to watch it, you watch it. I'm not going to condemn you. I'm not going to try to make it a bigger deal than is possible. I would love to plant questions in the minds of people as we watch things like The Bachelor, just for a discerning lens to watch. I think my biggest thing would be something to this degree. Watching, fully engaging, loving, celebrating something like this, it has its impact on you, whether you want to admit it or not.
For sure.
It has a forming, shaping component to it. And I don't know that we're always aware when we're entertained, laughing, emotionally drawn into something. We let our guard down and the shaping and the forming starts, and we're not even aware we're being shaped and formed.
Yeah.
That, at the end of the day, would be one of my biggest concerns in general about it.
For sure. And it's literally the opposite of what we want in our own personal relationships and our own personal marriages. And so watching it, it's just like, are you trying to live vicariously through these people? Because I know in your own marriage or relationship, you would never tolerate any of those things.
I told Danny that yesterday. I just was like, wait a minute. Nobody would ever do this in real life. You would never want to go out with a guy or a girl in dating, and you realize yesterday they hooked up with 3 other people.
Listen, I did it unknowingly. I would never recommend
That's
that.
a whole other episode of a podcast for a whole other story. But yeah, you're like, nobody chooses that in real life.
No.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I also explained to you yesterday as well, as like there is a sense of Stockholm syndrome. They are in a house cut off from the world. There's no technology they can use. So when you think about it, you're sitting in a house with other girls also dating this guy, and you're only talking about this guy.
Yeah.
Of course, like those feelings are going to come up if it's the only thing you think about, right?
They need little signs.
Yeah.
Help me.
And that's what I thought was so strange. Watching some episodes where they're talking about their relationships with this man as if like they're different men, but they're all
It's
dating
the
the
same
same
one.
man.
That's
And
interesting,
they're
yeah.
all talking about the same one. And then if you look at the other ladies' faces that they're talking, they're like, I'm so happy for you. And then like,
And then they go do their
Right.
testimonials, and they're like, nope. not
right.
at all.
It's just like,
Yep,
That's fascinating.
I know.
it's
Well-
so bad on your psyche and all the things. Oh, okay, sorry.
Are you feeling the conviction yet, Danny?
Well, I mean, what you're talking about. But there is that balance. I mean, we still live in a world like we live in, but you focus on like, well, what's filling you? So are you using this to fill you, or are you using this as like, no, this is just something I watch? And I think we've exposed that on all these topics of like talking about Bruno Mars. We all still like will listen to the radio, but is that where we get filled? I think is the main
that's good.
question.
That's good.
But
And I wonder, and I have no way of actually getting the truth of this, but what would make somebody want to be on the show is an interesting question to me. And there's probably as much to do with fame and fortune and influence and your post-Bachelor career as there is to actually just being on the show. It's a pathway for some people. And, whatever. That is what it is. And then asking that question, like, what would draw us into watching this? If it's like the rubbernecking on the highway, you see the wreck and everybody slows down, they want to see it. Is it like that? Like we just enjoy other people's
Chaos.
messy life, their dysfunction.
Right.
And part of that's voyeuristic, and it has a lot of dangers in and of itself. Sometimes it's a way my friends connect. Like that's a lot of people I know do that. It's just like, hey, it's how we connect. And so there's all kinds of different reasons. And, I had this crazy thought. This is really, really weird, but I'm really into this show called Meat Eater, and it's a guy who hunts, but then he shows you how to prepare different dishes at the end of it. And so in hunting, like the best hunting is done when the animals are in the rut season. They're in heat. And I started thinking, watching The Bachelor is like watching animals in heat.
Well, that's very
It's
true.
like
chaotic.
I'm watching a hunting show.
It's
It just
very
happens to be people trying to get a date. And there are entertaining elements to that, but there are also other sides to it to just be careful of.
For sure.
well, so I have a question for the table.
All right.
Uh-oh.
Do you think it's okay to go on the show if you hold true to your faith, you don't sleep with the bachelor at the end, and you don't get married at the end?
It's a great question.
I mean,
Ask that question again.
You want a second
because
pass?
this stems from,
Yeah.
so like I said, there's a lot of people that go on this show
Right.
that say they're Christians and proclaim it on the show. There was one contestant that even prayed on the show.
Yeah.
So if you think these people are going on, right? So do you think it's okay to go on the show if you hold true to your faith, meaning you don't sleep with the bachelor and you don't get married at the end, but you continue like your relationship, right?
Your wheels are turning, Cynthia.
Because when you think of dating, the whole point as a Christian of dating is, to eventually become engaged, get married. And when we're dating, you're looking at commitment, trust, chemistry, belief systems, and ultimately someone that shows you that they can love you unconditionally. Literally, The Bachelor is the opposite of all of those things. And it's like, well, what would a Christian get out of being involved in the middle of that? Because it's disloyalty. There's just so many things. And I just don't see the coalition of like, why would you want to be surrounded around that?
Yeah.
Especially if you're saying, I'm not going to get married at the end either. So why do you want to be a part of it?
Yeah. Or are you talking about the person who's the bachelor or the bachelorette or all the other ones? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Lord.
Like,
Maybe you
there's
wanna be the
probably-
bachelor.
There's probably different reasons there. But, I think the thing that stuck out in what you asked was holding true to your faith and defining what is that?
Yeah.
What does it mean to hold true to your faith? I think sometimes we want to say holding true to my faith is I didn't do this, I didn't do this, I didn't do this, I didn't do this. And it's like, well, those are the prohibitions you avoided, but did you lean into the like invitations
Right.
that faith has? And I don't know the answer to that. And I wouldn't even start to guess what all the different motivations people have. Like for me personally, I don't know how I could go on the show and be true to my faith because,
Yeah.
like, let's just say it this way. What if emotions do connect you with somebody? What if you are the one who is picked? You have started out on a shaky foundation. Like best case scenario, if you're going on the show and you are the one, the stats are not very promising.
Yeah.
Like barely a couple, has
Right.
made, I did look up that stat. But the percentages are far worse for marriages from The Bachelor than they are in the population. So you've started off on a foundation that's already shaky. Relationships are hard enough as it is.
Yes.
And so the thing that I really don't have that strong an opinion if somebody cares to go on The Bachelor or not. Do whatever you want to do.
I have some.
Yeah, I would say this. The problem is we'll go into real relationships with some of the same assumptions,
Yes.
thinking, well, yeah, they did this or they're like this or whatever, but I'll just excuse that for now.
Right.
And it's like, you can't excuse that for now because once you go down that path, and that's, I sort of hinted towards this, you take the word marriage off The Bachelor and I would just say, I don't have any problem. Just do whatever you want to do. The moment you put marriage in there and it is a uniquely Christian institution,
Yeah.
then you're sort of already, I'll use the word perverting the intention God has for something so sacred
Yes.
that has the possibility to be so life-giving. And yet our society has devalued marriage
Oh, for sure.
to such a point.
Yeah.
It's the center of silly reality games. And so I think that's my biggest concern is what does this do to a whole generation? My oldest daughter is younger than The Bachelor. So I was joking. She doesn't know a world without The
Yep.
Bachelor.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just like, so at the end of the day, that has had a shaping effect on society. And we've got to be careful for that.
And I feel like it shapes how our kids that are going into young adults even view marriage
Yeah,
and dating.
absolutely.
And what you said about marriage, patterns don't change. You're taking these individuals who are used to being with multiple women or multiple men,
Yep.
and then you're going to marry them or get engaged and you think that mindset is just going to shift to just me and you. That doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And yet, I would argue there are cases of that in real world. Of
Totally.
having guy friends in high school. They called it a roster. They would have list of girls that they just had on the back burner if they ever wanted someone.
That's very true.
Roster.
Yeah.
It used to
Now
be
they
the
aren't-
black book.
Now they aren't planning on marrying them like The
Yeah.
Bachelor, but like that's
Yep.
still prominent in our society. Like people have pulled that concept of like well, having a little bit of everything is nice.
Yep.
And I think for me, that's one of the places where you see humans aren't really good at navigating blurred lines of reality.
Yeah.
So the moment you get emotions involved, the moment you get relational connection involved, a little bit of chemistry. I mean, they're picking people who have similar lifestyles and interests for a reason. If they're polar opposites, the show doesn't work. But we're not good at discerning those lines of reality. And so once the heart gets hooked, once we laugh a little bit, once we're emotionally engaged, we start losing some discerning abilities.
Right.
And that's where we need these warning lights to be like, whoa, 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 whoa. So in some sense, like my point is, this is the kind of reality show that can be a little bit too real. To your
Yes.
point, it leaks into real life. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, I know somebody who sort of tries to live that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's not really working for them, but they're still doing it.
Yep.
It's not creating meaningful connections, but hookup culture, whatever you want to call it, is like a real deal.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
And I have one more question because
right.
this is the Bible and The Bachelor.
The Bible and the Bachelor.
Ask some of the Bible experts here. And yes, this isn't the same idea, but it's still like, in a way, in the Bible, there's polygamy in the Old Testament. Where do we stand on that? I mean, was it okay then, or is it? Where do we stand on that? Because in the way, like, sure, multiple dating isn't the same as multiple marriages, but like
Totally.
similar concept, I guess. Where do we?
So I would say the Bible describes polygamy. I don't know that we can find a place where the Bible condones
Right.
polygamy. I think there's a description of what was happening in society, and us living in our modern culture can't necessarily understand it if we transport back into that culture. That was a part of many cultures back in the day. And unfortunately, it many times leaked over into followers of God. But I don't know, I mean, like wise men of the Bible, Solomon,
Yeah.
like King David, a man after God's own heart. This is happening in their life. I don't think the Bible is ever necessarily saying, that's a good model to follow. I think it's describing this is part of the creep of culture into followers of God.
Yeah.
And we're not always aware in our generation what's the creep of culture into our generation as we're following Jesus. And so I think that's one of the warnings. And so we can't, just because it was prevalent in that day doesn't ever mean that it was approved by God. And so I would say I don't think God ever approved it. I think from Genesis, the idea of marriage in Genesis, the earliest chapters, is legitimately God created us male and female in his image to be married, a man to a woman. And like that's just this consistent pattern that God has established. You go to the New Testament, Jesus affirms it, Paul speaks to it. Like it's just, it's
Yes.
there. And so like I look at something like this in the show, and I say, there's obviously, I think, some setting itself up against principles of the Bible in regards to marriage. But I would say more practically, it sets itself up against some relational principles of the Bible. There are these one another's, like 100+ times that the Bible says about love one another, serve one another, forgive one another, honor one another. One of them is Romans chapter 12. Paul says this, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourself. I don't know there's any way possible on a show like The Bachelor to honor each other. You're literally in a cutthroat competition
Yes.
that is in the midst of going after a love interest. How do you love one? How do you know if love is sincere? Like nothing about the show is sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. No, the aim of the series is how close can you get to not crossing over that line. That's why you had the question, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And so it's like it's a recipe for building relationships on a shaky foundation, not honor one another, love one another, being sincere to one another. So like I would say, if you're solely watching The Bachelor for entertainment, whatever, okay, like that's what it is. Don't try to impose that it's good for your soul or
Right.
good for your relationship. It may actually be chipping away at some weak points in your relationship. It may be like, oh, I wish you would take me away on a helicopter on a da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
Like, this isn't real life.
Yeah.
It's like the modern day soap opera.
Yes.
And we are living vicariously through people. Like, oh, isn't that sweet?
They went to Italy.
Yeah.
But then it
it's
starts to create that
and
own
then he
discontentment.
did that with another girl the next day.
Right.
So we forget that part.
Yes.
Totally agree with everything he said. But yeah, it does. It creates that discontentment in your heart. And so I would say, yes, watch whatever you want, but guard your mind and guard your heart. And your children are watching. So just be careful, because the things that we watch, that we listen to, they do have lasting impacts on us, whether we realize it right away or not. It does. Even like, I watch The Office all the time. And sometimes randomly I'll say things. And if I'm in a room with people who have no idea what I'm talking about, then I just look crazy. But the things that you watch and listen to the most, that's like your first stop, your first go-to. And that can be dangerous when you're watching something like The Bachelor all the time.
That's good.
So, yeah, just guard your hearts.
Those are good questions, though. I want to be careful and maybe qualify this. When I say watch whatever you want to, I'm not literally giving a license, because I think that's dangerous.
Yes.
I think that there is the call for wisdom, and I think there's a call for even wisdom within community.
Yes.
Like having relationships with people where you're like, what do you think about this? Like you process. I think the dilemma we're in right now, it's every person for themselves. And so don't you tell me what I can or cannot do. So I'm trying to avoid that trap, but say, how do you get into a community that helps make you want to grow, become who God has created you to be, follow Jesus, and have discernment. And like you've got some really interesting things that you saw, Danny. You mentioned a little bit of it about like even almost a Christian subculture to the and subtext to The Bachelor. And that makes me really pause and to say, seriously, like we're going to baptize The Bachelor to try to make it appropriate for us. Like, oh man, like if you can do that with Bachelor, it's almost a free license to do that with anything. Well, I'm going to do anything I want to do, and then just sort of throw a little bit of Jesus in there and think it's good, right? And it's like, no, that's not actually how this works. And so it does really call for wisdom, and it does really call for discernment. And I think it really is a call for having friends, having community around you that speak life into you, that also can say, are you going down a rabbit trail here? Are you sure this is good for you? And can keep a close account with you.
Yep.
I think that's what has been good. I mean, we mentioned before we started, like, there's groups here that watch it. And so with that, there's like self-conviction of like, we've had people that come to my apartment that can watch it, totally fine. We've had people that come and like, you know what, I really don't feel comfortable watching the show. And there's been no bashing on it. We're like, we get it. Like, we understand we can hang out another time. But like having that, if this is not for me, it's not for me. And that's totally fine and stuff.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yes.
There it is.
The Bible and the Bachelor.
Bible and the Bachelor. I mean, it's honestly more. It's more about the Bachelor than the Bible this week.
We've sprinkled some Bible. Lord. Thank you so much for joining us on this.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts, you two, and for your research. I felt like the loser this week.
This was the worst research I've ever done. Sorry, guys who like The Bachelor.
Well, come join us another week on another episode for some of Cynthia's good research.
Yes, I'll take that.
Perfect.
All right, thanks so much.